Hey, Greg here, founder of Wrestling-Divas.webs.com, dedicated to highlighting the most beautiful and deadly competitors in professional wrestling. My next special guest is a professional wrestler and a professional bodybuilder trained by Man Pondo. She is a former Juggalo Championship Wrestling Tag Team Champion and Resistance Pro Wrestling Women's Champion. She has also made appearances on WWE's flagship brand, NXT. I'd like to welcome my next special guest, Crazy Mary Dobson. Hi, Mary. Are you there?
What's up, guys? Yeah, I'm here.
Good to hear from you. Thanks for joining me.
No problem, man.
So before we get over the start of your career and get into that, as I just said in the introduction, you made some appearances on NXT. I believe the first time you faced Becky Lynch, and Becky is a good friend of mine and I think a great competitor. And the second time around, and I believe it's airing this upcoming week, you faced Bayley, and she just won the NXT Women's Championship. So I'd like to know what it was like to be a part of that big production, because NXT is really taking off into its own, and what you're going to take away from the experience going forward in your career.
Yeah, I was very, very, very happy to have the matches I have had at NXT. I mean, it's really awesome to wrestle for NXT, let alone wrestle the people I got to wrestle. You know, Becky Lynch now being on, the main roster, and Bayley being, who she is. I mean, Bayley was a huge star in the independents, and now she's an even bigger star in NXT. So the thing with NXT is you don't know who you're wrestling or what you're doing till you get there. So I was very excited both times that I went there, getting to wrestle the people I did. And you don't have a lot of time to, prepare for it. You don't have a lot of time to let it sink in. You just got to stay awesome and get ready to do it. And I had great matches with both the girls. They weren't very long, of course, but I learned a lot from both of them and hope to be back very soon.
So I just watched the match again that you had with Becky, and I thought you were really solid for the time that you were given. So props to you, and I'm sure that WWE will see a great future with you if they end up picking you up. But I want to go over the start of your career, and I was doing a lot of research prior to the interview. You got into wrestling through watching all the hardcore necro butcher type death matches when you were younger, and you got into contact with Man Pondo, and huge props to that guy, because I honestly don't know how he can walk. I mean, I've heard stories about the injuries he's endured and the matches that he's had, and of course I followed his career for a while. But what about the death matches was appealing to you? Like, I understand that it's for shock value and that it's over the top, but what kind of connection do you have to those types of matches? Because you've been through them too.
Yeah, growing up, very little, me and my grandma always watched wrestling and sci-fi movies and the Sci-Fi Channel, so I always been around wrestling. I always enjoyed wrestling, and I was a real big fan of the wrestling video games as a kid. And but I never really was like, man, I want to do that one day. That's awesome. And but because it was just something that was unattainable to me. It was something that I never thought I'd be able to do. And I was a big, going into my middle school and high school years, I was a big Insane Clown Posse fan. And I got tickets to go when I was 16 years old. I got tickets to go to the Gathering of the Juggalos in Cave in Rock, Illinois. At the Gathering of the Juggalos, they had Juggalo Championship Wrestling, which is JCW. That was my first real independent show, live independent show. And I went there and I saw Pondo and Necro Butcher versus the Haters. And it was a death match, and it blew my mind. I mean, the pain and the blood and the glass flying everywhere, and that was the first time I actually thought that I was close enough to it. I actually thought, man, I could possibly do this. This is something I could possibly talk to these guys and try to get trained. So when I was probably about 17 and a half, I wrote Pondo on his Facebook, and he gave me Mickey Knuckles' name, because him, Mickey, and a few other people lived in this house together in Charleston, Indiana. And I just so happened to live in this small town of Charleston, Indiana. So I trained with Mickey for about 2 weeks, if that, and then she kind of got busy, and me and my ex-boyfriend at the time just started traveling with Pondo, and I took the training very seriously. I showed up every time, no matter how bad I get beat up, or no matter how tired I would be, because I was in high school still, and I worked not quite a full-time job. I was pulling almost 40 hours a week and going to school.
Oh, wow.
But
wow.
I would still come, and my ex-boyfriend really wasn't feeling it, so we broke up. And when I was about 18 and a half, me and Pondo, because I'm still traveling with Pondo, me and Pondo got together, and we've been traveling ever since.
So what was your mentality prior to really getting into training? Because I'm sure that there must have been a side of you saying, oh, man, this is physical, especially after watching death matches. So once you went through the training, what was that like? How did that change the mentality that you had towards wrestling?
I have played sports all my life. I played softball for 12 years. I was part of the swim team, the dive team. I played football up until my 7th grade year in middle school. I pretty much, any sport you can name besides soccer, I pretty much did it. And so the physical part was something I really enjoyed. And there's not really like a competition while you're in wrestling class, but you're always trying to be as good as everyone else there. So I really like that aspect of it. And my real training, actually, like where I became the wrestler I am today, took place in Japan. I got trained at Takamishinoku School, which is the Kayakai Dojo, and that was I'd wake up at 10 every day. That would last from about 10 o'clock till like 3 p.m. I would eat and rest for like an hour, and then from let's say from about like 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. I would train with the girls from Mexico, the CMLL girls, and I just tried to get as much training as possible, and I tried to get in the best shape as possible in the little amount of time I had. My career is kind of really it's been really fast. Everything's been happening so fast. I haven't even been wrestling 4 years yet, and I've been fortunate to do all the things I've done in wrestling. So I always try to stay busy. I always try to be training, and I always try to, better myself every day, because the business is going real fast for me. So I'm just trying to keep up.
For lack of a better term, there's really been a mixed view on the whole deathmatch, hardcore style of wrestling in the industry from people who run it behind the scenes. Some enjoy the shock value and seeing all the spectacular bumps and enjoy seeing all the violence, but then there are others who say that it's too dangerous and that it may be hurting wrestling because it's desensitizing people from the whole sort of illusion. What is your opinion on this? I mean, where do you see that style of wrestling fitting into the industry as a whole?
I kind of look at it as like movies. You're gonna have your romance movies, you're gonna have your action movies, and you're gonna have like your horror movies. And I believe that it's just a different type of it's a different taste. Like I know a lot of people who don't like deathmatch wrestling, and I know a lot of people that do. I mean, you don't go to a little indie show in Kentucky and compare it to like Pro Wrestling Guerrilla in California, So I just think it's just a different branch. I think it has its place and everything. I love going to deathmatch tournaments, and I don't believe that it's desensitizing people. I just think that when people look at those certain types of wrestlers, like, for instance, Nick Gage was at Masters of Pain. Like, to me, like, Nick Gage can take more pain of it, like more of a beating than the average wrestler. So it's more thinking like, man, the wrestlers are a different kind of breed, and not that the wrestling's different. If that makes any sense.
Of course. So you said that everything was, going your way really fast, and that, this opportunity is opening up for you, and that you're definitely progressing at a faster rate than it sounds like you thought you would, being a part of NXT and everything like that. So how do you keep yourself grounded amongst all that chaos? Because it can be quite difficult in the entertainment industry, and I study acting, so I understand this in a sense that, there's a lot of people behind the scenes who judge you for you because you're the business. It's not like you're a traveling salesman and, you're selling vacuums and you're like, oh, we don't like this vacuum, so we'll take this one from you. It can be very personal when you get rejected or, when there's all these politics behind the scenes. So how do you keep your head on straight?
I try to do other things besides wrestling. Like when I was in Japan for 3 months, to me it was really, it's like, don't get me wrong, I love being in Japan, but anyone who's there for an extended period of time will realize that it's really stressful and really tiring to be in a just wrestling mindset, like when all you're doing is just wrestling, like your whole life is wrestling. And back here at home, I'm also an Olympic weightlifter. I also work at GameStop. I'm an avid video game player, and I love watching movies. So I think the way I stay grounded and the way I stay sane is my life isn't all wrestling. Don't get me wrong, I love wrestling. It's at the top of my list, but I make time for other things. Like when I'm home, I'm focused on, my next weightlifting competition, or I'm focused on, the next video game that's going to come out. I'm actually working on doing like a video game review website, so I've been working on that as well. It's like the weekends here for wrestling. I normally wrestle every weekend and a lot of times during the week, so I just try to keep the wrestling with wrestling and do my stuff at home. I mean, everything I do at home is kind of wrestling oriented. Like the reason I weightlift and the reason I diet and exercise is so I can perform better at wrestling. And but it's not all just wrestling. I like to enjoy other things, and I try to have a little yin and yang in my life.
So under your Crazy Mary Dobson moniker, there's a lot that's implied there, and of course people who paid attention to your career realize that you do like the hardcore stuff, and you have taken a lot of crazy bumps, been thrown off scaffolds, been hit with items and, staple guns and whatever else. But when you're in there performing and you're in front of the crowd, as far as psychology goes, what is it that you want the crowd to take away from you whenever you perform?
When I first, Man Pondo gave me my wrestling name, and when I first got into the business, all I wanted to do was be a deathmatch wrestler, and that's where the Crazy Mary Dobson came from. As my career progressed, and I became I became an actual wrestler. I became the wrestler I am today. Like I was like, well, man, I don't want to. I want to try to get hired by the bigger companies, and they're not going to want my face all scarred up. So, like, who am I now? I had a big issue with getting my character over, not doing the death matches, because that's what made me crazy. But my name had been out there so much, I didn't really think it'd be good to change it. So I had to change myself, and now my gimmick's going towards more like Emily Rose, Exorcist kind of thing. I wear the one contact, kind of like the split personality thing, and I judge pain differently. And I try to get my possessed gimmick off while I'm wrestling. That I'm kind of enjoying the pain instead of. And of course it hurts me. Of course it does take its toll on me, but I kind of enjoy it in a little sick, twisted way that I do. I try to let the audience see that my match is just like one big horror movie.
So when you're out there competing, and you've competed all across the world and everything, where do you see the balance between wrestling in terms of an art form of performance, and like you said, a big horror show and a big spectacle, and the technicality that goes into it? Because you just can't be this big showman or show off, and not deliver, the solidarity that's required of wrestling, whether it's, you're an amateur wrestler, whether it's you're a high flyer. You need to be solid all around. So where do you see that balance coming in, and should one ever take a precedent over the other?
But I think a great example of this would be I wrestle for Shimmer, and Shimmer runs like twice a year. And while I'm at Shimmer, Shimmer is just made up of the best female wrestlers from around the world. That's what Shimmer is. That's what it's branded to be, and that's what it delivers. And when I'm there, I'm like, I don't want to be like every girl here. I don't want to. I need to make myself different. And I watch the matches, and all these girls, they're great wrestlers. So I think to myself, I'm like, well, some of these girls here are better high flyers than me, or they're better ground wrestlers than me, so what am I going to do to make myself a commodity or make myself an oddity at this company? And that's where my gimmick really comes in handy because, yeah, I will do a bunch of high-flying cool moves, and all the moves I do, I like to think they're crisp, they're well laid out, and they're where they're supposed to be. However, my gimmick is also in there, like, wholeheartedly. If I'm in a submission, instead of working my way out of submission, I'll like rip my own hair out so the girl gets off of me. I'll take huge bumps and then like exorcist rise out of them and do some other move. I just try to put my gimmick in my moves, and it actually works out better that way. It's because I don't have to do a bunch of moves to get the same reaction. You know, if I put a little gimmick in there and then I put a little bit of my moves in there, it gets the same reaction, if not better. That's what Shimmer really taught me, that I need to really up my gimmick to stand out somewhere.
So, as far as, your career, you've worked with some fantastic people. I mean, down in Shine, you're working with Daphne, and I honestly think, not that I'm really biased, but she's like one of the most underrated talents out there as far as when her wrestling career was active. And you've competed across the world, and like you said, in Shimmer. Take me through your process of learning and sort of not just necessarily training, but as far as, like you said, sharpening your gimmick or working on your technicality as an in-ring performer. What do you go through? Do you watch, horror films to kind of think about what your character would do? I mean, what do you kind of do that's outside of the box?
I have a notebook and that I carry around with me all the time. It's kind of small, so it fits in my bag. But anytime something happens, or anytime I'm like, if I'm watching like the Manson Diaries, or if I'm watching, if I'm watching, there's a movie called Bronson, if I'm watching that, if I'm watching an Exorcist movie, or if anything, or even listen to a song, if anything pops into my head, I will write that down in that book. And if I'm doing a promo, or if I'm just in wrestling and I think that idea will fit, I will incorporate those ideas. I'm very methodical, and I'm very observant as well, and I'll sit back, and people will do things that they don't notice, but I will notice about them, and I try to incorporate that in my wrestling. So I think it's those small things that count. It's those a change of your words. It's like even a facial expression. All those things make the biggest difference to me. So I think the most thing that helps me is my little book. If I talk to Daphne and while we're talking, if she says something, if she gives me an idea for my gimmick, I'll also write that down in that book. My book has tons and tons and tons of stuff in it, and I don't know, who knows if I'll use all of it, who knows if I'll just wing it and do my own thing, but I do have that there, and I get a lot of my inspiration from music, and just anything I listen to, anything I'm doing it for a reason, and I'm taking stuff from it. I don't like to just mess around,
So as far as your career, obviously you're still very young. I mean, in terms of the business standards, you're still pretty new at this, although you're making strides really fast. How do you see wrestling going into your life moving forward, even after you, quote unquote, hang up your boots? Because I've always heard that once you enter the wrestling industry, you never truly leave it.
Yeah, I totally believe that too. No one ever retires from wrestling. Wrestling's like a drug. You need it. Your life revolves around it, and once you're in it, once you have that little taste of it, I mean, you can't leave. No matter if you're just managing, or you're helping run the company, or you're watching it at home and ranting about it on Facebook. You're always involved in wrestling. I'm a personal trainer at a CrossFit/weightlifting gym, so I'll probably do that after I get done wrestling. Hopefully I make a big enough name for myself in wrestling that'll kind of help me, in my personal training aspect, kind of get a name for myself and, to like attract clients. But I'm hoping to wrestle as long as my body will let me. It's not something that, I ever think about quitting. Of course, girls really can't last as long as guys do. Our bodies just aren't made to, endure the kind of physical stuff that we endure in the ring. So hopefully I my career will last a long time. I do my best to stay healthy and to make the right choices, and train enough to where my body's not going to deteriorate as fast.
So you just mentioned about the wear and tear on the body, and of course what you said is very true in terms of ladies being in the industry, and quite frankly that's why they don't last as long. But whenever you doubt yourself as far as, how far you're going to go, especially when it comes to injuries, because wrestling, to make a show work, you have to put a lot of trust into the person that you're working with. So how do you get over that fear, especially if you don't know that person personally speaking?
I've learned as my career's gone on to not trust people as much. When I first started wrestling, I was like, yeah, screw it, let's do it. I'll go with this balcony, and I'm sure you'll catch me. I'm trying to not be like that now. I'm a very trusting person at times, and it's, unfortunately through wrestling it's come to bite me in the ass, but I'm going through my career I'm trying to think about the future every time I get in the ring. I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't do that at this show, because what if there's a bigger show and I hurt myself during this show? Or, that's why I kind of stopped doing death matches, is because, that was tearing me up, that was tearing on my face, and I'm a big fan of scars, but a lot of people aren't. And, wrestling, we're essentially selling ourselves. So I don't think someone would want there's not a real big fan base for scarred up girls. So at least not yet anyways. Hopefully that'll change soon. But, I definitely think about the future every time I'm in the ring. I'm thinking about my future when I stop doing death matches, and also have Pondo thinking about my future. He brings me back to reality a lot if I'm talking about doing this bump in my match, and he's like, well, maybe you shouldn't do that this time. We got this coming up. And I've learned to listen to him, and, he is quite a bit older than me, so, he tries to teach me from his mistakes that he's already made, and I'm very fortunate in that aspect.
So obviously, although your kind of deathmatch career is winding down, and you're being more careful about your body, and for example, Man Pondo, his body has been through a whole lot. Honestly, I don't know how he can get up in the morning, so I salute him for that. and same thing with like Necro Butcher and everything like that. Wrestling has been under fire for a lot of different reasons in terms of healthcare and the way that, these employers should be taking care of the people who put on shows. And then, you talk about going down the route of prescription drugs and everything like that. Do you think wrestling should be regulated more in that sense, in terms of how things are policed and what wrestlers are able to do based on their health? Or, how should we kind of help this whole conundrum of bad health once they retire?
I think definitely. I think it's up to our country kind of thing. I don't think healthcare for independent wrestlers is ever going to be a thing. I think that's going to need to be something that's done for our whole country, like affordable healthcare that's not Obamacare. One thing I would love to see in wrestling, everywhere you go, is like blood tests. That's something that is kind of scary for deathmatch wrestlers, and I know Pondo doesn't do deathmatches now without that kind of, blood test being done or something done recently. Because, it would suck to think one match, and it could be like a small match, could ruin your whole life. I know Pondo has, he is very fortunate in his health for all the bumps he's taken and all the punishment he's taken his body through, but his back has been out a couple times, he's not 100%, and it'd be awesome, if he did have some kind of health care that we could fall back on, or, in the future that we know will be taken care of if something does happen to him, or even myself. I fortunately have health insurance until I'm 26 because of my father, but it's just something that wrestlers, it's sad to say, but just can't think about. You can't think about, well, man, if I do this match and my back goes out, I'm just screwed because I don't have health insurance. It definitely, people always, I guess, hope that they'll get hired onto a bigger company, so if something does happen to them, that they will be taken care of. Like, imagine if Daniel Bryan didn't get hired by WWE and he was going through all this neck trouble just by himself. You know, he'd probably be in a whole different boat.
Mm-hmm. Before we wrap up, this is always my most favorite question to ask, and it's frankly the hardest for all my special guests. If you could sum up your experience as a professional wrestler using just one word, what would it be?
Ruthless, probably.
So
yeah, this is, what was that?
Oh, no, go ahead.
I would say ruthless. This business is ruthless. You have to be ruthless to be in this business. I mean, if I could choose two words, it'd be ruthless but rewarding. You know, like my career has been great to me. I haven't had any, I haven't had any major injuries that have taken me out. Everything seems to be falling into the line like I want it to, and I'm just along for the ride. So, but it's definitely cutthroat.
So, I understand that you have a lot of different ways that fans or promoters who are interested in hiring you can contact you. So, for the record, why don't you plug those in so that they can be aware of that?
Cool. Yeah. On my Twitter has all my stuff on there. My Twitter's Crazy Mary Dobson. One word, I guess. And my email is crazymarydobson@hotmail.com. So if you know my wrestling name, you will know how to book me because my stuff is just my wrestling name. So hopefully you know my wrestling name if you're trying to book me. I get some weird messages of people just being like, "Are you a wrestler? I'd like to book you." Well, if you know as a wrestler, you wouldn't be freaking asking me that. But yeah, crazymarydobson@hotmail.com if you want to book me. I'm pretty good about getting back to people. I check it several times a day. So, yeah, that's about it.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate it. I see big things in your future, and I've been following your career pretty much ever since your debut, so this was truly an honor for me, and I wish you all the best of luck, and I'm pretty sure we'll be seeing you on TV real soon.
Thank you for taking the time to let me do this interview too, man. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone else for tuning in. Be sure to check out www.wrestling-divas.webs.com for more content and updates, and be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wrestling Divas, again with a Z at the end, for all the latest